Hello and welcome to National Park Wild. I'm Eric, and this is a new National Park battle. In honor of Yellowstone recently turning 150 years old, I am pitting it against its neighbor to the south, Grand Teton National Park. These two parks are interesting to compare. Some elements are very similar given their region, however, others are incredibly different, maybe also because of the region. We'll get to that. I'll talk about some individual things that are great about each park, compare the two, and I'll determine a better park overall at the end. Let's start by kind of introducing our competitors. First of all, we have Yellowstone, the world's first national park, and certainly one of the best. An incredible diversity: mountains, lakes, waterfalls, canyons, and most notably, geysers and geothermal features. The largest concentration of geothermal features in the world is here, and they are truly amazing. Definitely one of the highlights of the park. They're all around. You have Grand Prismatic Spring, Old Faithful, Norris Geyser Basin, and so much more. The wildlife here is also pretty hard to match, and there's tons of recreation with great hiking, paddling, whitewater rafting, fishing, horseback riding, and so much more. So this park is definitely one of the quintessential parks of the US. However, Grand Teton is also hard to outdo. It is not quite as popular as Yellowstone overall, but that does make for a more quiet experience overall. And it has stunning mountains. The main Grand Teton Mountain is probably one of the most beautiful in the country. You also have really strong wildlife, a lot of hikes, including without a doubt some of the best backcountry hiking in the entire country. And there's plenty of other activities you can do, including floating along the Snake River. So that's an introduction to each park. Let's compare the two. First of all, we'll talk scenery. Which one is better in this regard? For me, I personally think Yellowstone is more beautiful. This is tough. I do think Grand Teton itself, the mountain, could possibly beat the best of Yellowstone. However, Yellowstone has so much to offer. Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, Old Faithful, Grand Prismatic Spring, Lamar Valley, Hayden Valley, Yellowstone Lake, West Thumb Geyser Basin. The list really does go on with this one. There is so much to see, so it's definitely a hard one to beat in terms of scenery. That said, Grand Teton has incredible mountains. It is held back a little by the fact that I don't think there's a ton of scenery outside of the mountains that will blow you away. I love some of the lakes and rivers for sure. The Snake River, of course, is beautiful, and there are some nice open plains. But this park does have one strong scenic element, and not a ton supporting it, while Yellowstone has a huge lineup that really helps it with scenery. So I think Yellowstone is overall better in that regard. I now do want to compare the hiking and recreation. As far as recreational activities, I normally mostly just do hiking in a park. However, both of these have incredible water activities that I did while I was there. I'll start by talking about whitewater rafting in Yellowstone. This is such a fun experience. It is technically outside of the park for the most part, but my last whitewater rafting in Yellowstone, I saw an elk from the water, which is cool, and I think it's a fun, adventurous experience, definitely one I enjoy doing in any park I go to. However, Grand Teton has Snake River float trips. These are unbelievable. I would say a float trip is the highlight of a trip to Grand Teton, apart from maybe some hikes. But my trip, not only did we get incredible sunset views of the mountains, we saw many bald eagles and beavers. This was definitely so cool because you get so up close to animals that you don't normally see because you're not normally right by the water. So all in all, between these water activities, I do like Grand Teton more. For hiking alone, I have not done the best hikes in either park, honestly. I've seen a lot of both parks, but I haven't seen all because there's so much to see and do in each. However, from what I've done, I do prefer Yellowstone. I found that Inspiration Point was not quite as strong as I had heard from some. It is a nice view, but I think being up close to the mountains is the cooler part of it. I did see a moose on that trail, which is something, and I love the waterfall there. But overall, Bunsen Peak at Yellowstone is quite hard to beat. On a clear day, if you hiked Bunsen Peak, which I did, you can see Grand Teton and the mountains in that park all the way from Yellowstone. You can see Mammoth Hot Springs from above, Lamar Valley, and so much more. And honestly, I didn't know much about this trail when I did it. It's underrated, and definitely one I recommend if you go to Yellowstone, especially if Mount Washburn is not available. So overall, I think the hiking is better in Yellowstone for that long hike, along with a mix of some of these shorter boardwalk trails that are very accessible and beautiful. Now to discuss wildlife. This is where I think the two parks are closest. There are some animals I've seen in both. I've seen bison, elk, deer. That's all in both of them. However, there are some animals I've seen in one and not the other. I've seen many birds that were in both. Eagles were in both, which is cool. I definitely saw more bald eagles in Grand Teton. But beavers and moose are probably the two main animals in Grand Teton I did not see in Yellowstone. However, Yellowstone makes up for that with black bears, grizzly bears, coyotes, and wolves. I've seen some of the best Yellowstone wildlife there is. Moose are pretty much the only major mammal I've not seen in the park. I've seen so many bison. They're probably my favorite animal to see in the US. So I love that. And honestly, it's just impossible to beat Yellowstone's wildlife. No park has been able to beat it for me. I've been to Katmai, Denali, Lake Clark, Channel Islands, Theodore Roosevelt, nearly every park in the US, and none of them have quite as incredible wildlife as Yellowstone. So while Grand Teton had some special sightings like moose and calves and beavers along the water, Yellowstone simply cannot be beaten in that regard from my experiences. Both of these parks have incredible scenery. So much to do. Excellent scenic drives. So many places to just stop your car, pull out, and see something that you may not see a lot of people at. I find that even though both parks can get decent crowds, I do think there are areas in both that are very quiet. The eastern part of Grand Teton offers incredible views of the mountains, but very few people drive along it. In Yellowstone, some of the western parts, mainly toward the middle of the park, have really nice areas to pull out, see some wildlife, maybe some unique sightings and smaller geyser basins. Not a lot of people go to them. Both parks are full of hidden gems like this. One more thing I want to discuss is the sort of tourist aspects and accessibility. It's not something I care about too much in a park because I'm really going for the wild experience and seeing nice scenery. However, Yellowstone has built up quite a bit to accommodate the large crowds. Around the border of the park, you have some pretty large towns, honestly. And you have some incredibly developed little towns inside the park. There's a full cafeteria near Old Faithful now, which is quite interesting. I'm not a huge fan of it. Really, around Old Faithful, the entire area has been built up. It does not take away from the beauty of the site, so it does not bother me much. But it is the only thing that's kind of making Yellowstone a little less interesting for the national park lover, and honestly, a little less reason to go there, unfortunately. It's a great park, though. And then you have Grand Teton. Most of the development is outside the park. Getting to some of the cities that are inside of the park, it's a little more off the road, so it's not quite as developed. But then you have Jackson, Wyoming, often called Jackson Hole. And the coolest thing about Jackson for me was seeing a bighorn sheep as we drove through it on the way to Dinosaur National Monument. But I think this park is overall less developed, which is a good thing for the wild experience. So overall, I hear a lot of people call Grand Teton underrated. Some say it's better than Yellowstone. Is it? Well, overall in this battle, I'm going to give the win to Yellowstone National Park. Many of you who are fans of this channel probably already know that Yellowstone is my favorite national park. It is fun to compare these two, though. And about the note that Grand Teton's underrated, I'm not sure I agree with this. the fact that it still gets over 3 million visitors on most years, that is quite a good amount. So I don't really think it's underrated. It gets a lot of respect, and it deserves a lot of respect. I do not think it does not get hyped up. And it's absolutely an amazing park. Top 10 for me. But Yellowstone for me is the king for its diversity, wildlife, and just being a really special place for me. Both parks will hold a special place in my heart for my entire life, but I have to give Yellowstone the first place trophy. And that is the Wyoming Park Battle. Thank you for watching. Subscribe so you know when new national park battles come out. I'll see you next time.